This map marks out the area of spread of what are called Indo-European languages, spoken over a vast area across India and all across Europe up to Ireland. Not all the languages have been marked, but just a few significant names that represent some groups of languages. These languages are called Indo-European languages because they are all related in some way and have at least one common ancestral language that must have been spoken by some people somewhere at some remote time in the past. In fact, no one realized how many languages were related to each other and how they were related until European linguists learned Sanskrit. That turned on a light of realization that started a search for the place of origin of the common ancestral language. This video will deal with two competing modern theories about the origin of Indo-European languages. The most commonly cited theory is the steppe origin theory, in which the languages are thought to have originated in the steppe region of Eurasia. The competing theory is known as the out of India theory or the PIE in India theory, best elaborated by Shrikant Talageri. The steppe origin theory claims that people speaking an ancestral language called Proto-Indo-European or PIE for short originated in the flat, grassy steppes of Eurasia. After their population and development proceeded beyond a point, the people started spreading out in all directions. First, a group speaking the extinct language called Hittite or Anatolian scurried off to the south and west. Then other groups developing new languages branched out with the Greeks, the Italic languages that later became Latin, Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese, the Celtic languages that spread all the way to the British Isles, the Germanic languages that include German, English, and Scandinavian languages, and the Balto Slavic languages like Slovenian, Lithuanian, and Russian. Weirdly, a language related to all these groups called Tocharian went in the opposite direction and ended up near Xinjiang in China. Meanwhile, a final group called the Indo-Iranians are said to have headed south and east towards India and Iran, and then splitting up to go their own ways, the Iranians going west to Iran and the others towards India, with each developing their own separate language and literature. The people who went to India are said to have spoken Sanskrit and composed the 20,000 verses of all the Vedas and several thousand post-Vedic commentaries in the paltry few centuries that linguists have allowed them while pushing this steppe origin theory. There are several problems with the steppe origin theory. First, no one knows what language was spoken in the steppe in that era. Second, this theory cannot explain the fact that both Indian and Iranian philosophical narratives developed together in the same geographic area, as is clearly evident from their own common internal evidence. Neither the Iranians nor Indians record the so-called migrations from the steppe that took them 1,500 years and 3,000 kilometers, but magically all the literature and poetry they composed in the next 500 years is remembered well. Third, the steppe theory fails to explain how Tocharian, a language seemingly more related to European languages, ended up 4,000 kilometers to the east of the steppe, while the rest of the languages went west. Finally, the theory does not even make the pretense of explaining how the Greek language has the same sound changes as the Iranian language. All these holes in the story have been filled by Shrikant Talageri's out of India hypothesis. Talageri's thesis cites the presence of PIE within India. Indian historical records, ignored by philologists, cite the existence of three groups or tribes in northern India. These were the Puru, Anu, and Druhyu tribes. Over the course of time, wars, and population expansions, it happened that the Purus, speaking Vedic Sanskrit, remained in India. but the other two tribes migrated out. The Anu tribes, whose priests were called Atharvans, founded Zoroastrianism and later migrated west to Iran. Their early days were in India, and their religious literature shares commonality with the Vedas of the Purus. The migrations of the Anu tribes took them all across Iran. Some people, migrating even further, took their language to Greece. This explains the peculiar sound changes of S to H, which are common to people of the extreme west of India in Saurashtra, Iran, and Greece. Meanwhile, the Druhyus migrated west and north, initially mixing with the Anus, but later moving north into the Eurasian steppe. The Hittites broke off earliest and headed towards the Caspian Sea. The Druhyus can be described as the Proto-Europeans, speaking a language that later became all the European languages, but they were initially speaking similar common dialects as they migrated to the steppe. That is why, when the Tocharians broke off to go east, they carried with them a language similar to European languages. From the steppe, the various European languages spread out to their current locations. Just like the Puru of the Indians, who had learned men called Rishis, and the learned men of Iran came to be called Magi, the Druhyus too had learned men whose memory was retained among the Celts of Europe as Druids. The PIE in India theory is a far more elegant theory than the steppe theory and explains all the anomalies that remain unexplained in the steppe theory. It is also unrestricted by the rigid time periods allotted by fanciful imagination. The sidelining and discarding of ancient Indian and Zoroastrian narratives as being worthless by colonial philologists has resulted in a situation where a false story of language spread has been built up for the last 200 years. That false narrative, with few facts to support it, is now opposed by pleading that a more credible theory is wrong because a Hindu has come up with a better theory. Thanks for watching.